Hi, I'm Curt Frye, and if you're like me, you've probably gone through the list of available functions in Excel and wondered what some of them were used for. If you have come across the hypergeometric distribution, then you have probably asked exactly that question. So for this movie, I would like to show you how to use the hypergeometric distribution, and in this case, it's really useful for game design. So if you build your own games, especially collectible card games, this is a terrific way to look at your data. The sample file is hypergeometric distribution, and that's an Excel workbook you can find a link to in the video description below. I will use as my example the collectible card game that I'm most familiar with, and that is Magic the Gathering. In Magic the Gathering, you start with a hand size of 7 cards, so you shuffle your deck and you draw 7 cards to start with, and then you get power or mana from lands of various colors, or they can also be colorless. The deck size is typically 60. That's the minimum, and for efficiency, you will go for 60, which is the minimum size, and that means you need to determine the number of lands that you want to have in your deck. I would typically use 17, and the idea is that I want to calculate how often I will get a certain number of lands in my hand. So we have the possibility of 0 through 7. And to calculate the probability of each of those occurrences, I need to use the hypergeometric distribution. So in cell E3, which I've already selected, I'll type equal. And the function is HYPEGEOM.DIST. So I've got that highlighted there, and I'll press tab. And now I need to provide the values. I'll start with the sample S, and this is the number of successes. In other words, the number of lands that I would draw in my hand of 7 cards. And that number is in D3. So in cell E3, I'll type D3, then a comma, and I will leave that reference relative so that I can copy it down and have the number change. So it's looking at 1, 2, 3, and so on down to 7. Now we need to look at the number in the sample, and that is the hand size, which is in B3. And I don't want that reference to change, so I'll press F4 to make it an absolute reference, then a comma. The population successes is the number of lands in the deck, and again, I want to see how many lands I get, and getting one is considered a success. So that's in B4. Press F4 to make it absolute, then a comma. The number of cards total in the population, and that is the deck size. So we're drawing from 60 cards, so that's B5. Press F4, then a comma. And now we need to determine whether we want the cumulative distribution or the probability mass function. Cumulative would say what are the odds that you are getting, or rather the probability that you are getting 0 lands, then 0, 1, 0, 1 or 2, and so on down to 7. In this case, I want to know the probability of getting a specific number of lands. So we will use false and go for the probability mass distribution, which looks for the probability of achieving exactly 0, exactly 1, and on down to 7. So I've got false highlighted. I'll press tab, right parentheses, and enter. And I see I'll get 0 lands about 8% of the time. And if I click cell E3 and drag the fill handle down, I can see the other probabilities. So I'll get 1 about 1/4 of the time, 2 about 1/3 of the time, 3 about 1 out of 5, and you can see the other probabilities there. If you draw a hand and you don't like it, you can replace it by going down to 6 cards. This is called a mulligan. So you put your hand back in the deck and you shuffle it up so the cards are randomized, and then you draw 6. So let's see what the probabilities are for 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 lands if you're only drawing 6 cards to start. So I'll click in cell H3, then equal. Again, we are using HYPEGEOM.DIST. The sample successes is in G3. So again, we're starting with 0 and assuming that getting a land is a success. The number of cards that we are sampling is the hand size, and that is B7. And again, F4 to make it absolute, then a comma. The population successes, the total number of lands, is in B8. All right, that is appearing, so I'll press F4, and then there we go. Hitting the comma to add it after B8 took my tooltip below the formula itself, so that's good, we can see it. And then the number of cards in the population is in B9. Press F4 to make it absolute, then a comma. And again, we want the probability mass function. We're looking at specific values, not up to or cumulative. So I'll highlight false, right parentheses, and enter. And with 6 cards, the probability of getting 0 lands goes up to 0.12, so about 12%, or 1 out of every 8 times. And I'll click cell H3 and drag the fill handle down. And you can see with 6 cards, the odds of getting either 1 or 2 lands is very high. So you will get that 1 or 2 about 2 out of 3 times. And then 3 above that, and the odds of getting 4, 5, or 6 get much, much smaller as you go up. So going down to a hand of 6, if you don't like your original hand, can be a real disadvantage. You have fewer cards to start with, and also the probability of getting only 1 or 2 lands is fairly high. So again, that is what you can use the hypergeometric distribution for. And if you create games, I think you will find it to be very useful. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like it below and subscribe to my channel.